Everyone, and welcome back to another exciting video about cells. This is about cell reproduction, also known as mitosis, not to be confused with mitoses, which are down there. I can see them, but you can't. So, cell reproduction and the mitosis shuffle. By now, maybe you're humming along the song about the mitosis shuffle because you've watched it or listened to it already. You can listen to it later. So, the topic, don't forget, cell reproduction at the top, the date, whatever day it happens to be right now, go ahead and record that, and then a place there for you to record some notes about mitosis. Mitosis and cell reproduction. So the first thing we're going to look at is the basic word of what all these are talking about. They're talking about a form of asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction is basically making an almost identical copy of a cell, or in some cases, an organism. Sometimes asexual reproduction produces an identical organism, or in this case, since we're talking about cells, it produces an identical cell. So here are a few examples of asexual reproduction. Some of you might have actually used some of these. If you are plant growers, you might have put a little piece of a plant into the ground and produced another plant from it. It's called vegetative propagation or cutting. Some plants are able to reproduce that way. Bacteria reproduce by something called binary fission. It's another form of asexual reproduction. There are yeast moving around the circle. There are yeast that reproduce by budding. And then finally, at the very top, there are animals that can also reproduce asexually. One specific way is something called regeneration. If you've heard of an earthworm being able to make more of itself, or a starfish being able to make more of itself. Or sometimes asexual reproduction is just basically regeneration of lost body parts. And still, the cells are being reproduced. The cells are making more, even though it's not making a brand new organism. Because the cells reproducing is basically what mitosis is. The cell structures, the nucleus, they all divide to go from one cell to two cells. Okay, from 1 to 2 cells. And that's important because later on we're going to find another process that's similar to mitosis, but it does not make 2 cells. It makes 4 instead. So the star of mitosis is something known as the chromosome. And basically, if you ever draw a chromosome, just draw an X because that's what we're looking at. We're looking at the chromosome. Later on, you're going to learn a lot more about chromosomes when we study genetics. But for now, let's just stick with this is a chromosome. There are lots of C words in this mitosis section, in this cell reproduction section. There's the chromosome. There's the centromere. That is the center of the chromosomes where these 2 chromosomes are connected. And you will notice that they are not connected like V's hooked together. It is 2 long strands that are hooked together in the center. So it'd be kind of like taking your arms like this and then separating each part. That's how the X's would separate if we're talking about mitosis. So the chromosome, the centromere, and then there's something called a chromatid, which is just a single part of the chromosome. And those are the pieces inside the nucleus of the cell that contain the genetic information. They are the things that make you who you are. So, the stages of mitosis. We have basically, I need to move myself here because I'm in the way. We have basically 4 stages of mitosis. And then not only do we have 4 stages of mitosis, we have what's called the in-between stage. And that's where we're going to start. We're going to start with something called interphase. And interphase, if you look at the picture over here, interphase is the phase between divisions. And so it's called the growing step. It's the place where all the parts of the cells double. And so instead of having enough stuff for 1 cell, it has enough stuff now for 2 cells. And that's probably, when it comes to mitosis, that's the longest phase because it takes a while for the cell to go out and find and build the parts it needs to make another cell. After interphase, then there are a series of stages where the cell actually goes about dividing itself. So the first phase is something called prophase. Prophase is the first phase of mitosis, the first actual phase of mitosis. And in prophase, there's this thing called a spindle that forms. You can see there are these barrel-like looking things. They're called centrioles. Those centrioles, they used to be kind of in the center together. They move to the two ends and they form this thing called a spindle. Now, have you ever seen a magnetic field? You have? Well, you're wrong. You've never seen a magnetic field. Have you ever seen the wind? No, you're wrong again. You've never seen the wind. You have seen the effects of a magnetic field, and you've seen the effects of the wind, but you have never actually seen those things. It's the same thing with this mysterious thing called a spindle. We draw it, but it's not actually there. It's not something you can actually see, but we know that it's there. It's kind of like gravity. If you drop a pencil, you know what's going to happen, right? It's going to land on the floor. It's not going to land on the ceiling, but gravity is invisible. So the spindle is also invisible. That's what happens in prophase. Now, our stars, the chromosomes, do something very important during this phase. They shorten and thicken, okay? Shorten and thicken. That's all they need to do during prophase. We move on to the second phase of metaphase, and you can see there's a couple different picture things here, but I'm going to go with this metaphase that's right here. Metaphase, if you want to think of it, this means line up. You notice that the X's are all lined up in the center, that the centrioles are on either side, the spindle is still there, and the X's are lined up. The chromosomes are lined up in the middle of the cell. That is the only picture you will see of metaphase. You might find prophase looking a little different times, but that is what you are going to see when you see metaphase. Now, it's possible the X's are going to be on their ends instead of on their sides, but it's the same idea. So that's metaphase, the lining up phase. Then we move on to something called anaphase. In anaphase, the chromosomes start to pull apart. And remember, they're hooked together like this, and they pull apart like this. They do not pull apart and get like separated in the middle. They pull apart like that, and they get pulled towards the different centrioles on either side. So now the chromosomes have been doubled, and so basically now they're being taken half each way so that they have the information that is needed to produce then another organism, another cell, another creature, whatever it may be. So anaphase is when they start to pull apart. I like to say anaphase is when it changes from X's to V's or U's or C's or whatever letter you want to say this is right here in anaphase. Finally, we come to telophase. The telophase basically means two new cells. During telophase, the nuclear membrane comes around the chromosomes, and the cell membrane starts to divide and break into two cells. Now, telophase is the last phase, but there is something that happens when the cells are completely separate at the end of mitosis, and it's called cytokinesis. So cytokinesis is the separation. So at the end of mitosis, you have prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, and during telophase at the very end, there's this process called cytokinesis, where the cell actually divides into two daughter cells. Here's a video that you can watch sometime. We're not going to watch it together, but please watch it because it shows mitosis in action. And then, of course, this was kind of a humorous little thing I found that showed the stages of mitosis, the iPhone version of the stages of mitosis from one cell to two. You will find a song called the Mitosis Shuffle. That video should be on this slide deck somewhere. Look for it, or look for a link to the Mitosis Shuffle that tells you a little bit more about mitosis. So now it's your turn. Come up with a little quiz, 3 to 5 questions. Ask questions about the phases of mitosis, what happens at the phases of mitosis, the important parts that are in mitosis, like the chromosomes and the centrioles and the centromeres, maybe. And then at the bottom, if you have any questions, write them down there. If you have anything you're still a little bit confused about, Write it down there so that you remember to send me a message and ask me about it. I will tell you, this may be one of the most difficult parts of the cell unit is mitosis. If you need to, come back and watch this video again. Look at the slide deck again. Watch the video that's in the middle that shows the different phases of mitosis. Look at it carefully. Draw some pictures of mitosis because they will help you to start to learn what the phases look like. Use the Quizlet sets that have pictures of mitosis and have the phases in writing as well. That will help you to understand what the phases are in mitosis. Good luck, and I hope you enjoy the song.